We just reopened applications for Character Labs. We kind of wanted to be able to catch people when they're ready. So we're switching to a model where we pre-accept teams.
It's probably the biggest, sort of most fun project with teams that I've gotten to do in my whole career. So it seems like it could be really, really fun to dive into like what's going on with that thing? What is it all about?
Yeah, in some ways, this will be like an ad for Character Labs. And I also, just to make this ultra self-referential, I thought maybe we could follow our what, why, how framework that we talked about in one of the early episodes. Take our own advice here. First, describe what it is, then talk about why you should care, why we did it, why we think it's important, and then walk through the details of how it works.
Well, should we record a podcast?
Yeah, let's do it.
This is Jake and Jay-Z. This is Jake and Jay-Z.
Welcome to episode 12 of Jake and Jay-Z, the weekly podcast about startups, design, technology, marketing, and everything else we're thinking about. That's Jake over there. I'm Jay-Z. We are the founders of Character Capital, the authors of Sprint and Make Time. This is our podcast. And if you want to get a weekly newsletter with the latest episode, some other cool stuff that we found, go to jakeandjz.com. You can sign up for there. And before we get into the episode, I have a quick favor to ask. If you are enjoying this, please go into whatever app you're using, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any other app, subscribe, follow, hit like, leave us a comment, and send us a question if you have one. You can email us at hey@jakeandjz.com, and it'd be great to hear from you. So let's start with what Character Labs is. Maybe I'll pull up the webpage. We'll have a little visual aid here.
Let's see how we did on the webpage. Let's see how we did with what, why, how.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, we should have checked before going live here. Let's see.
All right, so the headline is pretty good. The headline says more or less what it is. Character Labs is our 4-week sprint program for AI founders. And then the rest of this text is a mix of why and what. Talks about our experience working with AI teams, helping them build products that really click for their customers. So instead of being kind of focused on sort of neat technology, really trying to build things that work for customers, and why you should care. If you want to stand out from the crowd and build a differentiated product with AI, that's what Character Labs is all about. Jake, what happens during Character Labs?
Well, Character Labs for me is like, if I had a magic wand, what would be the most fun for me and best for the founder, for the team situation? And after decades of working in tech, and a decade of working from the investing side, working with startups, I think that magic wand is like a month together where we form a hypothesis and then test the heck out of that hypothesis as fast as possible to figure out if there's a click between the customer and the product. Yeah. And there's no better time to do that than immediately at the beginning. And no more fun thing to do really than to just get right into it. Just get right into the product, right into the thing, right into the talking to people. It's a blast.
Yeah. So what we do in Character Labs is we spend, like Jake said, a month together. Founders apply for this program. We keep it really small. We want to be able to spend a lot of time with each team that's participating. So we kind of review all the applications. We look for teams where we think that they're kind of at that perfect moment. They have some big questions about what they're doing, that hypothesis that they need to figure out. We make an investment right away. So we make a small investment, which means that you're off the bat, you're a member of the Character portfolio, so that we can help you in all sorts of different ways, and we can introduce you to the other founders that we've invested in, and so on. And then we work together in that month. We run 5 back-to-back sprints. So we do a foundation sprint, then we do 3 design sprints, and then we do a pitch sprint at the end, which is sort of pulling everything together into a story. And then we follow that up with 4 more weeks of of weekly office hours. So checking in with teams every week to see how things are going, but also being available as they continue to run their own sprints, as they go out to raise money or to launch their product, to answer questions and provide feedbacks. Like you said, it's sort of the Venn diagram of fun and useful.
Yeah, I think it's I was remembering back, like what caused us? What was the sort of instigation for this? And we've been running character for, gosh, is it 4 years now? It's
Basically
non-trivial
4
amount of
years.
time.
Yeah.
It's like we could have gotten a college degree in this amount of time. And I think it's like something that was kind of surprising was that the character investment. So the original plan was invest in seed, pre-seed companies, occasional Series A, and it was working pretty well, actually, kind of right from the beginning. Kudos to you and Eli, found really some strong companies to invest in just right off the bat. And so it would have been, I think, made a little more sense to just keep doing just that. But we couldn't help ourselves. There was this thing that I noticed, I know you noticed, that Eli noticed, which was like, man, it is so exciting to get to work for these intense periods of time with founders when they're in these really early moments. But it's kind of like you get a taste of that, and then it's like, well, what if we had even more? And what if the moment was even earlier, even more formative for them? And so this conversation started with just like, oh man, like what would that look like? There are a lot of accelerators already out there. There's already a game you can play to start an accelerator. But what would be the thing that would actually be so fun to us and so useful to founders that it would be worth going to the trouble of trying to create a new thing when the character sort of version 1.0 was already chugging along pretty well.
Yeah. And we also had people, when we talked to them about Character Labs, not founders, but like LPs and other investors, they're like, well, do you guys really want to do that much work? Like, are you crazy? Are you like looking for like extra work to do?
Yeah.
So it wasn't, and in fact, we ran a foundation sprint about Character Labs to help us decide if it was worth the effort, because we knew it would be a huge undertaking. It's really, I mean, to spend 4 weeks, this is for us when we're in Character Labs, when we're running it, it's literally all day, every day for 4 weeks working with founders. Like it's a very different type of mode for an investor to be in, I think.
Yeah. It's something that we like could have definitely escaped doing. And every year would be a little less sweat if we were not doing it.
Yeah, so, but wouldn't have been quite in that sweet Venn diagram overlap. I was also finding that a lot of times when I would meet with founders who were a bit early for us to invest in our original focus on seed investing, it was just like, it was frustrating. It was not satisfactory, and I think it was not satisfactory to me, and it was also not satisfactory to you or Eli, or most importantly, to the founders. I think, if you go talk to founders about fundraising, they are frustrated by a lot of things, rightfully so. But one of the things that they're pretty consistently frustrated by is like this game of, you talk to an investor and they're like, it's like, it's a little early. Why don't we keep in touch? Like, talk to me when you're raising your next round, or let's chat again in 6 months. But it's all like it's like a dance. It's like performative, right? It's like sort of posturing toward each other. It's not a real, you're not building a real relationship. You're not engaging deeply because you're not doing work together. You're just talking. You're just kind of sharing, here's what I think, here's what I think, here's an update. And so that was a big part of the motivation for me. It was like, how can we change that conversation when we meet somebody who's a bit early for our sort of core seed focus? How can we change the conversation from, this is interesting, but it's too early, to this is interesting, and let's start working together in Character Labs. It'll be better for us. It'll be a lot better for you, we think, because you'll have this experience of going through these sprints, working closely with us, making a lot of progress on your journey toward product market fit. It does feel like it's really changed the process for us. It's changed it from like a lot of like, let's keep in touch, to a lot to more of like, well, let's work together a little bit now as a way of building a relationship for the future.
A lot of people do not buy this, but I strongly believe this is true. That if you make a prototype way before you're ready and put it in customers' hands just at the very beginning of a project, that will have a radical, profound effect on the chances that you're going to build something is really meaningful to people and that therefore is really successful. And that has been a belief I have felt in my bones since having these experiences at Google, where we were starting, a new project on Gmail or starting what became Google Meet, and saw that that moment, that very first moment when you are absolutely unprepared, but you do it anyway. You create a prototype anyway because you must, and you put it in people's hands. That it's like lightning in your fingers. And when we got to Google Ventures and we started working there, and God, we were like blessed to have that #blessed to have that opportunity. That was amazing.
Yeah.
That was amazing. And in the first year or two, you, me, Braden, Michael Margolis, Daniel Burka, when he joined us, we were getting to work with these earlier stage companies, seed, A, but like those companies, when we did sprints with them, it was pretty powerful. It was pretty close to the magic I felt when like we started something from zero at Google with some of the first design sprints.
Yeah, a lot of times it would be not at the very beginning of that company, but it would be at the beginning of a new project for them. So like with Blue Bottle, it wasn't the beginning of Blue Bottle as a company, but it was at the beginning of them, creating sort of an online business.
One of the best experiences was Flatiron Health because it really was the beginning.
Great point.
And we made an investment in them because it was these repeat founders who already sold their company for, whatever to Google. It was really successful. So Google Ventures invests in them again when they go out on their own. And we got the chance to be there really early. And that was like, no surprise. I look back, that's one of the most exciting projects from Google Ventures days.
Yeah.
But as time went by, we got further from that because with Google Ventures improving reputation, improving ability to get in later stage deals, that was good, I guess, for Alphabet. But for me, that was just like more and more boring because you invest in like a Series C, Series D company. I'm not saying you don't have an interesting problem at a Series C, Series D company, but like, it's just not for me. That's not what gets me out of bed.
Yeah.
So Character is cool because we're like getting way back to those like, those early moments, but Labs gives you the chance with an accelerator, you have the chance to actually go to the moment where it matters the most. And then really we get to how we get to be in there. So that's the why. First, selfishly, I think when we talked about this episode, we said we should talk about why this is valuable for people other than us. but for me, that's I think it's a little bit of both, right? Because if you are a founder and you've got this idea, maybe you've just started to work on it a little bit, or maybe you haven't even left your previous job. You're just like thinking about, should I take the plunge? Here's a chance where we can do everything we've learned over all of the years of trying to figure out what's the perfect way to start a big project.
Yeah.
And we can help you with that at the moment when we believe it'll have the highest impact, the highest leverage. And if you're starting to assemble your team, this whole way of working, which is experimenting on this super radically fast pace, which is working alone together and making sure that the debates and discussions you have, they're driven by the best contributions from every person on your team, that your conversations are balanced and structured in a way that removes a lot of the social bias and cognitive bias that often makes us make poor decisions. You get all of that in this formative moment, it can change the DNA of your company. And we really believe that. And that's why we not only left our other comfortable jobs to start Character or the other things we were doing, but changed the comfortable way Character was working to do this uncomfortable thing because it's just so important.
Yeah.
And that's why we want folks to do this. That's our why. That's pretty long for a website, for a subheader, but for me, that's what it's all about.
Well, we did have to write an entire Medium post about the why. So I'll share that real quick.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
When we launched Character Labs, we posted this and it's the why, if if you can't see this, I'm showing a blog post, a Medium post, and there's a section about timing is everything, about how when when we meet with founders who are too early, we want to find a way to work together. And I have a question for you, Jake, which is, I guess technically it's a rhetorical question because I think I know the answer, but I can imagine people wondering about it, which is, if we believe that the most important thing for founders to do, not just startup founders, but like anybody starting something new, if we think that the most important thing is for them to build a prototype, like sort of uncomfortably early, right? To make that one of the first things they do rather than something they do after a whole bunch of planning and strategizing and meetings and stuff like that. Why do they need us? Like, why should they do it in Character Labs, or why should they run a sprint to do that? Why shouldn't they just say, hey team, let's make a prototype. Like, let's do it.
Well, I mean, they should do that. They should just do it.
Yeah.
And
that would not be bad.
That would not be bad. I'm not going to sit here and tell you don't do that.
Yeah.
We've got a book about running sprints. You can get the book and you can run sprints, and they work well. I mean, it will work well. The reason why it would be fun for you and helpful, I think, for you to do it with us, and selfishly, it's fun for us if you do it with us, but the reason why I think it's helpful for founders, one thing is you don't have to think about the methodology. You don't have to flip through the book and say, okay, now we're doing this step, now we're doing that step. You don't have to decide whether, like, okay, should we really, like, we finished one, should we really do one next week? Or should we, like, God, I really need to catch up on email. And like, you don't have to wonder because you signed up for the whole thing. Like, we're expecting you to show up again. And honestly, it'll be good for you. If you've ever, taken an exercise class, if you've ever taken a yoga class, if you've ever worked with a trainer, or if you've ever, it could be anything, or even if you've ever like played a game in PE or like a sport and like you had to follow the rules and there was like a ref and there were just like people there expecting you to follow the rules. The social pressure of the other people who are in the cohort, and also of us who, like, we're going to be there talking to you every day about it. That part alone is really galvanizing. Yeah. And I don't want to say that like, that's it. Like, you just get the sort of like body who's sitting there watching you, looking over your shoulder, but it helps a lot to have that. Yeah. It helps a lot to have somebody guide you through the steps, I think, and say like, okay, this next step, here's what we're doing. Here's why. And now just do it. And like, you have 10 minutes to do it. Now do it. And then the other thing where, I want to flatter ourselves a little bit, I think we can provide some really useful feedback to what people are doing in those steps along the way. As you are figuring out who your target customer is and defining it, well, we've done that, I don't know, like 1,000 times now. And we've seen a lot of different teams define their target customer and then go out and try to recruit those customers and then run interviews with those customers. And then we've seen how the progression extends over the months and years to like, now we're selling to customers. Now those customers are repeat customers. Like we've just seen a lot of patterns to match. There's a lot of data in our, LLM to help identify patterns that might be useful to you. And that goes for sketching UI, for, is my prototype the right fidelity? Yeah. And I think then where it's probably the most helpful to have our thoughts on things is when folks run their tests, they have their scorecard, they've seen what's working, what's not working. And we can provide some coaching on, okay, where do you go from here? Should you stay the course? Where's the opportunity for you to learn from this, get better? What are the things that you should persevere on? A lot of those come from the founder's intuition. It's really helpful to have a coach who's seen it a lot of times. And that's also another part that I just really enjoy. It's so fun to get to have those conversations.
Yeah. Whenever you're working on something new, whether it's, a startup where you raised money or whether you're inside a big company, your biggest enemy is time, right? The biggest challenge that you have is like, how do you make time to make progress on that? But also, how do you make enough progress before, you run out of steam or you get you distracted by something else, or you run out of money, or you get there's a reorg or an executive change at the company, and suddenly the thing that you care about isn't the priority. And so I think part of what we do and what I really like to do when we run sprints is to help people figure out what matters most in this project right now, which usually looks like, what are the biggest risks? What are the questions that we need to answer first? Those linchpin decisions that are like, if this one thing doesn't work, the rest of it doesn't matter. Like, don't concern yourself with like the inner workings of the technical architecture or the specifics of the business model or the policy for how you're going to handle these edge cases. Because if nobody wants it, if nobody understands it, if it doesn't solve a problem, whatever, if you don't address those key risks, then the rest of it doesn't matter. We can help founders move a lot faster by working with them in these sprints in Character Labs. And if you, this reminds me a little bit of, I think it was the very first episode of Jake and Jay-Z when we talked about one of the teams in Character Labs who was feeling anxious that they weren't writing any code, right? It was like, they're both engineers and they're like, well, this is what we do is we write code. Like, we envisioned ourselves starting this business and then just immediately starting to like build it, to like code it up. But afterward they said, we're really glad that we didn't do that, because the thing that we would have jumped in and started developing wasn't the right thing. We prototyped that and tested that during Character Labs, and it wasn't the right thing. And it was actually something else that was a lot better. So being able to get through that period of uncertainty a lot faster than you otherwise would is, I think, one of the big benefits of working in this way.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're going to be going into the wilderness if you're a founder. You know, you have like, hopefully there's sort of a lighthouse that tells you, I'm really inspired to do this thing. I'm really excited about bringing this thing into, you know, the world. But to get there, to make it real, you have to go through the wilderness. And, you know, why not map things out a little bit first with some sprints, and why not take a you know, I don't know if we're a guide. I don't know if we're, you know, it's like, I think if you want to think about the Lord of the Rings, I think sometimes we are Gandalf-like. We have we've got the spell for this particular situation, but a lot of the times we're just Sam. We're just there with you. You know, we're going to carry your stuff. And either way, though, it's just nice to have somebody with you, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that works. I don't know if that metaphor works, but that's.
Worked for me. I found it compelling. All right, cool. So we talked about the what and the reasons that we do it. So that was what, and now the why. The reasons that we do this are for us. It's this sort of ideal overlap of, it's really fun for us and it's really useful for founders, because it allows them to, in the earliest days of starting something new, figure out some of the most important things they need to figure out, answer some of the biggest questions, address some of the most important risks. And as investors, it gives us a far better way to engage with founders than, hey, sounds interesting, call us back in 6 months, or let's have another Zoom call to keep in touch. It allows us to really start working together in a way that is sort of, you know, the risk is appropriately balanced for everybody. You know, we're not sort of investing more than we can, you know, afford to lose. The company isn't, you know, having to say like, I'm, you know, selling a huge percentage of my company to Character to do this. You know, it's, we think that the package sort of works for everybody. So we talked about why, we talked about what, we talked about why. Should we move into to how? Should we give a little bit of a detailed sort of look at what we actually do during Character Labs?
Yes, let's do that. That would be fun. So cool. I love to get into the details. I want to start though with something that's low detail, but it's going to be, well, I was just talking about maps. This is going to be kind of your high level map for what we're going to look at. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is a high level diagram of what we do in Character Labs. We do a foundation sprint, and we do a series of design sprints. This doesn't have the pitch sprint included in on it, but it does have the essence of what we're trying to accomplish, which is to create a founding hypothesis. This is part in blue here. And that's something we generate after the first couple days of our foundation sprint. And then we just want to test and test and test that founding hypothesis and update it if necessary. But just this high level notion is, figure out what your hypothesis is, get clear on that, get really explicit about it. It's often vague or not quite all together. We want to get it really crisp and clear, and then we want to test it. Design sprints, building prototypes, putting them in front of customers is a great way to do that. We'll do it again and again and again. We want to get to this moment where it clicks with customers, where it just feels like, oh yeah, that's making sense to them. They want it. They're like, can I pay you for this right now? They want it that bad. And they're like clinging to your shirt, like as you try to leave the room. Like that's what we're going for, that click. And that may happen within, we've seen it happen within the span of these 4 weeks. It may not, but you'll start to see signs of it, or you won't. And either way, you'll know. You'll just be so much farther along to, are we building the right thing? Are we ready to go to this part? So that's the big picture.
I think a lot of times when you read, if you read like blog posts or like LinkedIn posts about product market fit, there'll be a lot of caveats, a lot of like, well, it's sort of, you use it, you know it when you see it, or like, oh, it can be hard to tell, or like you use these metrics or like whatever. In our experience, like this click is very clear. Like when you see that change in behavior from customers who you're talking to one-on-one, right? This isn't some abstract notion of the market, whatever that is. It's like when you see the customer you're talking to one-on-one, when they lean forward, when they get excited, when they do all the things that you said, in our experience, that is very, very clear. And we just had a founder email us a few weeks ago who they were in Character Labs with us a couple months ago. So they've continued to work. They hadn't quite found that click. They weren't quite there, but they kept chipping away, building new prototypes, testing those, iterating, updating their hypothesis. And they emailed us and they were like, it clicked. It finally clicked. Like once that moment happened, it was just so instantly clear.
It's real. It's real. It's like when you see it, you'll know it. There's a great post it's one of Lenny's newsletter, and maybe we can find it and link to it in the show notes, where he talks about he emailed a bunch of different founders of really successful companies and was like, hey, looking back, when did you know you had product market fit? And it's astonishing to see how different it is. And how, so it's not as though product market fit is that clear either.
Right.
What's special here is you're having this one-to-one conversation with a customer. But the customer is looking at your prototype, may or may not even know that it's your product, right? It's like up against other products. They're kind of going through this shopping activity almost, where they're looking at different prototypes. They see yours, they go through it. And and if you see it, like this is just a really special opportunity to kind of zoom in to like this tiny piece of your market and see, in this one instance, in this moment, do we have what I think is product market fit? So that's the big picture. Now let's get into more details. We're going to go into the whiteboard. We're going to go into the template where we actually do all of the work in labs. So here's our template. And what you're going to see, just like there's a ton of stuff on here. If I zoom out so you can see everything that happens, it's covered with stuff. We've got week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. Probably earlier in this episode, I said 4 weeks. It's like 4.2 or something. So it does go into the 5th week a little bit. And the first week is kind of a short week. So anyway, you don't care. But like that's why there's 5 weeks. And there's so many activities here. And this is part of the reason why it is helpful to do this with a cohort, to do this with us leading you through and guiding you, because it's kind of like getting from the Shire to Mordor. There's like a lot of steps along the way, and a lot of different little like caves with spiders in them that you got to get through. So we start off with a foundation sprint. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about this because it's its whole own topic. We haven't really talked about it before, and it would be too much of a can of worms to open today. But the point of the foundation sprint, which I can show you, we go through a bunch of steps. We end with this founding hypothesis, like I mentioned before. The founding hypothesis is, if we help our target customer solve this target problem with, and then sort of identifying the approach we're going to take, what's the solution going to look like, we believe they're going to choose it over the competition, over the toughest competition that we have out there, because of this differentiation that we have. This is like a really basic, set of things. I don't think any of these things that, you need to know your customer. Oh, you need to know the problem you're solving. Like none of this stuff would you be like, oh my God, I never heard of that. Like, of course, this is obvious stuff, but it's also stuff that just gets swept by the wayside and does not get clarified usually in one clear, crisp spot. And even if it does, it sure as heck doesn't get tested in that clear way. So
Yeah.
we have this opportunity now to test this sentence, this statement with all of its different variables week after week after week by putting the solution into a concrete form in our design sprints.
And I think of the founding hypothesis as like two halves. So there's the first part of it is really about like clarity. And then the second part, the who are the real competitors and why is our solution radically different and better? That's really about pushing teams to sort of to be ambitious, to be radical, to really take a big swing at this opportunity. People are living their lives without your company, without your product. What's going to make them pay attention and wake up and say, oh my God, I need a better way?
It's kind of harsh. Honestly, look at this thing. It's kind of harsh because it shines this really unflattering spotlight on
There's nowhere
the
to hide.
reality. You know, like they're going to choose it over the competition to solve this problem. Like, well, are they really?
Yeah.
Are they? Like, the competition's probably pretty good. You know, it's like a lot of times the competition's amazing. Sometimes the competition is like, it's this workaround that people have been doing forever. And like, why should they spend even the calories to operate their brain while they think about your idea, let alone like try it and like pay money for it? So this unflattering spotlight on the bare bones of what you're all about, now we're like, okay, prove it. Prove this is true.
Yeah.
Design sprint 1, get really specific about the risks. What's the goal? How are you going to measure that goal? What are the risks? And this starts to just be like standard design sprint stuff, but it's with this, you know, the shadow of the founding hypothesis looming over it. I think it just holds the design sprint to a higher bar now because we know what we've got to prove. We're going to map out how it works. This is what we would do normally in a design sprint, but we're going to map out who are the customers. How do they discover what this thing is? When they're solving their problem, what does that look like?
They're living their life. They're doing their job. How are you going to get their attention? Every founder wants to write down word of mouth, right? Like, oh, they're going to hear about it from a friend. Like, well, that would be really nice. Like, I really hope that you get to the point where your friends are recommending your product to others. But for now, like, how are you going to interrupt that pattern of behavior that they had? How are you going to get their attention? How are you going to convince them to take a shot?
Yeah. When you have your discovery plan as word of mouth, it's kind of like saying like, what are you going to be spending most of your time on as a new founder? It's like, well, I'm going to need to do the IPO roadshow. So it's like, well, yeah, like maybe someday, but
we all hope that's true.
Yeah. A lot of things have to happen first.
Yeah.
A lot of things have to happen before word of mouth is just like powering your engineer. So, you know, and then right next to this, we'll have the target risk, which is usually, will people trust us? Like, does our solution actually solve their problem? Again, it's all sort of informed. It's lit up and overshadowed by that founding hypothesis. And then we get into recruiting. Okay, how are we going to find those customers? You need to start finding them right away because, hey, we're in week 2, we're in design sprint 1. And what you've got to do now is you've got to get these folks to actually like show up and interview, look at your prototype on this Friday. So they've got a lot to do here. Then we get into sketching solutions. This is, again, normal design sprint stuff, but every person on the team is going to sketch a solution. We're going to review those solutions, and then they're going to choose which of those to prototype. And often we're encouraging teams to prototype, 2, even 3 competing approaches, put those next to the competition that you identified. And then at the end of the week, you've got this scorecard. The scorecard has the founding hypothesis in it. It's got some specific hypotheses that we develop along the way in each design sprint. And it's got these target risks. Maybe, will people trust us? Does our solution really solve their problem? Things like that. But we're scoring interview after interview with customers. You're scoring like, do each of these elements work or not? And what we see, what we expect to see, is a lot of red here. Yeah. And it's so cool because already we're like just a handful of days in to labs. And already you've created a hypothesis, you've tested it, and you found all these things that were wrong with it. And you know what? If you had just worked the normal way, business as usual, you probably wouldn't have realized this stuff for months, if at all. Some teams don't even really realize, they don't really understand where a hypothesis is broken until after the company goes out of business, because they never got clear on it. Yeah. And they never were really assessing how they were doing against those essential metrics. Yeah. So most teams that fail, like they won't even know. They won't even know. I can look back on so many projects I worked on that didn't go as well as we'd hoped and think like we didn't know. And on the projects that did work well, on the Google Meets, on the features for Gmail that were really successful. If I think about when we worked with Slack, when we worked with, Flatiron Health, these were companies who were very clear, or teams who were very clear on what was going on here and did find ways to experiment. So this is just a formalized way to do that. Now from there, weeks 2, weeks 3, weeks 4, 5, we're just extending from there. So we're going to, hey, a lot of things didn't go well in this test. Let's do it again. We're going to adjust the map if we need to. We're going to come up with new sketches. We're going to come up with new prototypes, and we're going to test it again. And we're going to get things wrong again, and we're going to do it again. Design sprint 3, we expect even by the end that there's still red on the scorecard. But what we see is that these lights start to flip from red to green. And you just start to see, earlier on more red. And then as weeks go by, more and more green. And sometimes it can be pretty dramatic.
Yeah. And there's nothing magic about the sequence of 3 design sprints, but it reminds me of how, this is a bit of a weird, wonky, like inside baseball reference, but like, it reminds me of how, like, when you're interviewing customers, you don't need to talk to a lot more than 5 in each study, because you're going to just start hearing the same things over and over. Yeah. It's a similar sort of like asymptote where, like, if you charted like the number of sprints against like how much you're learning, we've seen pretty consistently, like around 3 sprints, you're kind of reaching a local maximum of like, okay, we kind of know what's going on here. In absence of totally going back to the drawing board, back to the founding hypothesis, and like revisiting some of the underlying assumptions, we've learned a lot of stuff. We know where we stand, and then you can start to make some bigger decisions on where to go from there, which is what we do, in the second to last row of this, which is the risk roadmap, which is sort of taking stock of what you've learned, what's true, what you're still unsure about, and making a plan.
Yeah, you said 3 sprints is not magic. I would say it's magic-ish. There's probably a bell curve of like how many successive sprints before a team sees their solution click and feels confident that, okay, we should leave design sprint mode and we should start writing code.
Yeah.
And it's, on one end of that bell curve, there'd be some teams who on the first week, they hit it exactly right. Or the second week. It's just that most teams, it'll be in the range of 3. And there'll be some teams who it's 4, it's 5, or this direction was just wrong. And this was a really cheap way for them to pivot, to find out that, like, God, that was a dead end.
Yeah. That's totally right. And as you're describing that, I can think of actual teams that have been in Character Labs where I'm like, yep, that company, it took them like an extra like 2 months and a bunch more sprints. That company, like, they knew after the first week. Like, I can think of really specific examples of that.
Yeah. You won't ever feel bad if you clear a month from your calendar, and then you're one of those lucky ones. You get it right on, by the end of week 2, and now you have 2 weeks clear that you can, you can write more code. Like, that'll be fine. Yeah. But by and large, this is right. And then the other thing we see on here, like, after we've done all these design sprints, we do a risk roadmap together. And no matter where you are, no matter, whether you felt like you hit it early and you were able to spend design sprint 3 just like starting to really build out the product in that rare instance, or you hit design sprint 3 and you're like, we still need 4 and 5. This is a very useful activity that you came up with, John, as far as I remember. And it's listing out, okay, these are the risks we identified earlier in our sprints that we have de-risked. We feel good about these now. These are like good to go. These are the ones that are still open. And this is like, each individual's hot take, and then the team chooses a mega hot take. This is like our hot take for where we're at.
Yep.
And this is what we think we need to do next, and like who needs to do them. Yeah. It's just, it's kind of a simple product management, maybe not 101. Maybe it's like, I'd like to think it was like 401, but like, it's a good simple thing that actually is like, it's super powerful. Like, hats off to you for recognizing that a team at this point, they need to do this simple, but super essential taking stock of where we're at so that they're ready to go on into the next phase.
I actually came up with this idea in 2012 and it took me another 11 years to put it into any sort of repeatable structure. But do you remember that sprint that we ran with Chad Hurley?
Yeah.
So Chad Hurley, who's one of the founders of YouTube, GV invested in a company that he started after YouTube, and we got to run some sprints with him. And I have this very clear memory. One of the things we did during that sprint was we made essentially a risk roadmap. We had a huge list. It was, I think, on butcher paper, and it must have been like 12 or 15 different risks. It was everything from like, technically, will it work, to will the customers trust it, to, all sorts of different things. And then we sort of checked them off, like, okay, we know these things, like we're feeling good about these we're not feeling so good about, we're not sure about these, and then here's how we're going to go and test them. It was a really messy version of this, but that idea has always seemed sort of obvious in, like you said, sort of product management course type of way. But like so many seemingly obvious things, just teams don't often do it. They don't often like take that moment to say like, okay, where are we? What do we know? Let's take stock of what we figured out and what we need to do next.
And it's one of those situations where if you don't have us looking over your shoulder, if you don't have coaches, like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
It's really powerful, right? So
2 other quick things I wanted to call out about what happens during these sprints that I think are really unique and have in some ways changed over time. One is that the process of recruiting customers to test with is a really helpful dry run for marketing and sales. It's another bright spotlight being shown on your plans. It's like, okay, like you said, you're going to get 10,000 small business owners to sign up for your product. Like, can you find 5? Like, can you get 5 to even agree to like have a conversation with you? And not to be a jerk, but like you've got to crawl before you can walk, before you can run, type of thing. Like it seems like a means to an end, right? We're just trying to get these customers to test with us, but it's actually a really important part of learning to build a business.
Man, I had an experience in middle school where some friends, we wanted to take a trip, and we were like, we need some money. And so how can we make money? So we cooked up this idea that we're going to put on a dance for the rest of the junior high school. Oh man, it's just looking back on it, it's so humiliating, just thinking about the whole thought process. But we're like, okay, you can rent out the cafeteria, and I'll bring my stereo and you bring your CDs. And just like we put up some signs, and like one guy showed up, another friend of ours showed up, like no one else. And like in hindsight, it was this vague picture of, everybody will come like they do to the other dances. And we're just doing the math of like every person pay $5. And I mean, we'll make a couple $100, like easy. If just, we just get 40 people. Well, can you actually even just like sell a ticket? That is a microcosm of a thing that happens when you go from like the pitch deck is the plan of like, okay, technically you'll rent the cafeteria, bring the stereo, people will show up, and you'll make money. The reality is you must get people to show up. They must choose that this is the activity they're going to do. That is a leap. And you'll be making it one way or another. You'll either be making it in this stressful way where it's like, okay, now we've built this big product and now we're having a hard time getting those people to show up. And oh God, when we finally do, what we built doesn't exactly match what they need. And that we've seen founders in that situation. It's very stressful. It is very stressful when we realize you have the wrong thing on your hands, or that the people just aren't there, or they don't have this problem that you thought they had.
Yep.
And in these series of sprints, there's, discomfort there, but we're all having the discomfort together. It's expected that it's uncomfortable. It's expected that we tell people every time, hey, it's a second sprint. You didn't get 5 people. You didn't even get 4 or 3. You got 1 person or 2 people the first week. Hey, you know what? That happens a lot. Good news. You get to try again this week, and you get to try again next week. It's not heartbreaking. It's okay. It's part of why there's 3 sprints, and like I just think that the emotional boost people get from the rest of the cohort is really nice in going through that.
Yeah.
And Jeanette, our advisor who works with the startups, she did research on Uber Eats. She's advised a ton of startups. She's a genius at figuring out who exactly is your customer. How exactly are we going to get in touch with them and get them to talk to you? and how can you ask them the right questions that'll pull out what you need. And people get the chance to talk to her and work with her on all this. And so, yeah, it's like, it feels like it turns something that is inevitably going to have some bad feelings in it and some disappointment and heartache into like, it's, hey, there's some good vibes here too. We're all in it together. And it's like we're learning as we go through it.
The other thing that I think this has been more of a change in the many years we've been running sprints, but I think is really a valuable and interesting part of the process is deciding what to prototype and how to prototype that thing. We both have a design background. So for us, the easiest way to make a prototype is usually in a tool like Keynote. Even though Keynote's they're designed for presentations, we use it a lot for mocking things up because it's really easy, or Figma, tools like that. But we've seen, especially I think in the last couple of years, as AI tools have become better and they're actually able to save developers time. Like we've seen teams make real software. It's not fully done, it's not fully functional, but we've seen teams where for them the fastest way to make a prototype that is really a simulation, it's a facade of their idea, is actually to write code or to ask AI to write code for them. And so I imagine that as we continue to run sprints with founders, we're just going to see that get better and better. And we're going to see it'll be possible for founders to make even more realistic prototypes faster, which will then enable them to learn even more and make each of these sprints that much more valuable.
And as it becomes easier to build products with AI, that means it's easier for your competitors to build them. It's easier for other people to build them. And it becomes all the more important that you click with the customer, that you really solve a problem for them and solve it in a way that's different from how other people are solving it, in a way that uniquely you can deliver on, which is a lot of what we dig into with the foundation sprint, is figuring out what is that going to be.
Yeah, cool. So that is Character Labs. It's our sprint program for AI founders. We think that it is the very best way to start building something new, to really get to the heart of, why am I doing this? Who are my customers? Why should they care? And is it actually going to click? And we do it through the foundation sprint, the design sprints, the risk roadmap, this opportunity to be clear about what you believe, to turn that into realistic prototypes, put those in front of real customers. If you've got any more questions about Character Labs, feel free to send us an email, hey@jakeandjz.com. If you're interested in participating in the program, even though it's not running for a few months, we accept applications early. We let in teams early from time to time. So please, if you're wondering, sort of err toward applying, toward reaching out. It'd be great to hear from you and learn about what you're working on. Any final thoughts, Jake, before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, we would love to work with you. It's really a joy for us.
Yeah.
And so we hope that, we hope to see you there.
Yeah. Cool.
And we'll see you next week virtually here. And then we'll see you in person for Character Labs.
Yeah. Awesome. This has been episode 12 of Jake and Jay-Z. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
This is Jake and Jay-Z. This is Jake and Jay-Z.